All right, let's hear Ioana Walter with her testimony.
People are often surprised that English isn't my first language and that I have a hole in the bottom of my foot. Let me explain. I grew up in Romania to Christian parents, and so Romanian's my first language. My parents were following Jesus under communism, which meant that as they shared the gospel and the hope of life with Christ with others, even as much as giving someone a Bible could land them in jail. That kind of life made a big impression on me as a little child, as young as 4. I ended up talking to my mom and asking Jesus to save me and to be my savior because I saw their faith and how that changed them and how that changed others. Then, after communism fell, my family was given the opportunity to immigrate to the U.S. My parents saw a lot of work to be done for the Lord in Romania, and at first they said, no thanks, we're good. But they kept getting a few more requests from the government if they wanted to go, and at the last request, they realized that they hadn't actually prayed about it. And after praying, they felt that God was clearly leading them to be a light in the city that he was going to send them to in America. So at 6.5, we moved to the U.S., and my dad was the only one that spoke English. Growing up in the U.S., I stuck out a bit. I had parents who had strong accents, and I had things like stuffed cabbage for lunch, a little different than the usual peanut butter and jelly sandwich. In middle school, I also had sometimes different concerns. I started to worry about things like the Lord's coming and if I was ready for that. I started to worry about, well, did I understand enough of the gospel when I was 4? And would I be taken with Christ or would I be left behind? This was a really big worry for me for a while, and I prayed a lot about it and tried to figure it all out. And then God graciously showed me that it wasn't just one prayer that changes and that's it, that just the prayer is the only thing that needs to happen. It's a continual decision and a continual following of Christ. So at about 11 or 12, I decided I wanted to kind of settle it once for all. And I sat down by my window and I prayed, confessing that I had fallen short of God's standards, that I needed him, and that I trusted in Christ's death and bodily resurrection to pay the penalty of the death that I deserved, and that from that point on, I wanted to follow him. And he began to show what life with him meant. So, about the hole in my foot. I was born with a birthmark, and that birthmark at about age 15 needed to be biopsied. And it was found that I had invasive malignant melanoma. It's an aggressive skin cancer that the doctors thought was a good chance had spread to my liver and possibly beyond. Thankfully, the liver biopsy came back negative, but I still needed surgery to remove the birthmark and eventually lymph nodes and other things. That summer was packed with doctor's visits and surgeries and recovery. It was not a comfortable time. It was not easy. It was painful and it was hard, but it was also a summer that I look back on as an amazing time of feeling God's presence and God's closeness in a way that I hadn't ever felt before and is different than what I feel now. I am a worrier by nature. That means I think of implausibly worst case scenarios and everything that could go wrong. But during that summer, I felt God's presence so close that he covered me and protected me from my anxious tendencies, and I literally couldn't worry. This was evidenced by a time when a chaplain after my first surgery was talking to me and asked me, okay, well, so what are you angry about? How are you feeling? What are the worries? And I was like, no, I'm good. I know that God has me in his hands and he's in control of everything. And really, even if the worst thing that happened is that I died, I'd be in heaven with Christ. And there's a lot of peace in knowing that. And so he gently took my mom aside and said, you know, she probably has some repressed anger and might be heading for a mental breakdown. But really, it just wasn't the case. It was God's presence was so close, and it was a precious time, despite a lot of pain and 6 months on crutches. That was one of God's faithfulnesses. Then during chapel at school, I started to really feel a burden for missions, and that God uh, was calling me to be willing to be a missionary anywhere. And I got really excited about that. And in my mind, I was thinking of overseas and some remote location, and I was really excited to do my best and be well prepared for that. Um, and I started to think, oh, I want to be an English teacher. My parents didn't think that was practical enough, though. So I argued that, well, maybe studying English I could, lead to translating the Bible into some unknown language. They recommended nursing instead. I wasn't really interested, but after praying about it, I felt that I needed to do as my parents recommended. So I applied to Oakland University's nursing program and was directly admitted. I worked hard at nursing school, and God gave me a friend named Amanda who was in the same program as me and had the heart of an evangelist. She dragged me into all sorts of situations where we could share Christ with others, and I was really thankful for this. I was praying for how God might use me in the future, but she was giving me practical opportunities to share Him right then, and that was really good. Also, during this time, I went to a Christian camp, and I felt like God was asking me if I'd be willing to be single for the rest of my life. And that took me back a bit because I had thought I'd like to get married and I loved children. But by the end of that week, I really felt convinced that if God wanted me to be single, He would give me the community and the joy and the strength to do so well and to enjoy it. And so I assumed I'd be single and then just needed to know where God was going to send me. Um, then, as I was finishing nursing school, my mom saw an opportunity for a graduate open house at the University of Michigan. And once again, it was hey, you could do this. And I was thinking, I don't want to do any more nursing. I don't like it still. And yeah, I felt like God was nudging me to go with her and to honor my mom. At the presentation, one of the programs, the Family Nurse Practitioner Nurse Midwife Combined program, they even mentioned that it had been used in overseas missions. That was the interesting thing of the evening, but still, why would I do more school? But my mom asked me to apply, and both of my parents said that I really should consider it. And I prayed about it, and once again, God said, honor your parents in this. So I applied, and I then started to very fervently pray, Lord, I don't think I have a chance to get in, but please don't let me get in. But if you do, please help me go. And so I got in. And then it started 4 more years of nursing. And I still didn't like nursing, and it still wasn't overseas. But inexplicably, I felt God's peace and God's leading. Each summer, though, I would still pray, like, God, could I get out of this? Can I do something else instead? And each summer, He would bring me back to, this is where I've led you. Be faithful in this. I can say that after the first 6 years of nursing, I did start to really love the last two. And that's a good thing. I'm so glad that God also had me do it all at once, because it meant I could do it before I had children, before I was pulled in a lot of different directions, and I could just focus on my studies. And now I get to serve God in a Christian clinic in Detroit using the skills I learned during that time. Also, while at U of M, Pearl, my first roommate, and I and a friend of hers named Daniel had started to talk and pray about all of the stories we had grown up with of hearing our parents talk about God's faithfulness in their lives and how they had seen God work in amazing ways. And we talked about how we had read the accounts in the book of Acts, and we wanted to live out things like that, where God was really working and changing people and really seeing God answer prayer and do amazing things. And so we started to get together and pray with others. And we really saw God work. For an example, the following year, we were helping some students move into the dorms, and we ended up meeting a freshman who had just come from China, and she was waiting to get her dorm room unlocked and had a longer than expected wait. So during that time, we talked and we shared what we believed and different things, and we invited her to Hope Church and to Bible study, and she came, and we were surprised, and she kept coming. and kept being interested and kept being willing to talk and to meet with us. And she eventually came to accept Christ and is still following the Lord now. And so that was one of the precious experiences during that time. God also worked in different prayer meetings and in changing people's hearts, and that was really encouraging. Now, during that time, another thing happened, that I started to get attracted to a guy. I was planning to be single, so I didn't like this. And so I had to talk to God and say, Lord, can you please take these feelings away? I'm going to be single. I don't want to deal with this. And God didn't take them away. So he led me to see that emotions are things that happen, and I can submit them to him, whether they're there or not, whether he takes them away or not. And so I did. I submitted them to him and said, okay, God, then let's see what happens, but I'll just ignore them for now, and please lead me. Now, a little bit later, uncharacteristically, a friend of mine made plans to meet me in a beautiful location on campus, and he even offered to pay for my lunch before going on a walk. I got really concerned. Then he said he had talked to my father and gotten permission and wanted me to consider a courtship relationship. At that moment, God clearly told me, this is why I haven't taken those emotions away. Are you willing to trust me and step into this? So I said yes to God, to trusting and learning to be more vulnerable than I wanted to be, and to Daniel Walter. We were married over 10 years ago, and there are so many stories of God's faithfulness and guidance in school and work and housing and relationships, in times where it was hard and in times when it was easy. And I am thankful that God gave me Daniel as a leader of our family and someone who's patiently and encouraging me and pointing me to Christ. Much to our surprise, God didn't call us overseas, but instead gave us work to do here at Hope Church and in our community and in Detroit. And as a mother who is frequently up at night, and as one who also frequently has nightmares, I am frequently, my nights are frequently interrupted. And so there's another time of God's faithfulness, that he has turned a lot of those interruptions into sweet times with him, where, for example, one time I was awoken in the night and felt I really needed to pray for a friend's safety. And later I found out that she was driving in the mountains and it was foggy, and she hit a sand barrier. And when she looked over the barrier, it was sheer cliff. And so God used those times when, for me, it felt like this is kind of no reason for me to be awake, to use it for his kingdom and his work. A verse that really sticks out to me is 2 Timothy 2:11-13. This is a trustworthy saying, for if we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, because he cannot deny himself. So in all of this, when I first became a Christian, I died with Christ, and I'm learning to live with him, and the enduring so that I can reign with him. And there is the real warning of denying him, and I know I need Christ's help and strength to not deny him. But really the bedrock is still God's faithfulness, and that he is faithful, and his character doesn't change no matter what. And these are stories of how I have seen God work and how God has met me in different circumstances. But I would strongly encourage all of you, ask God, if you haven't, to lead and guide you, to work in you and through you. And if you don't know Christ, to put your trust in him, because walking with him is so much better than trying to do it in my own strength, than trying to do it all by myself. He is faithful and he is good, and that is his nature.